We're asking the organizations, if you work closely with somebody, don't sit with them because what we're trying to do in the symposium is cross-pollinate ideas. Go ahead, have a seat. We said it would be a little hard to talk to you for a lunch. Welcome to everybody here in person. Welcome to everybody online. Thank you all for making the time to be here and have this conversation. I'm EmpowerEd's. I'm the Director of Educator Wellness from EmpowerEd. I'm going to introduce myself with a story this morning. So for many years, I ran my own business, coaching individuals on wellness. I specialized in overwhelmed professionals in Washington, D.C. As you can imagine, I loved it. And during that time, a Montessori charter school in my neighborhood contacted me and asked if I would lead a workshop on self-care and burnout for their teachers. I said, why not? I was a principal in the DC system and really emphasized how desperately people needed this work and convinced me to not just do a one-off workshop, but to put together a scope of work for them to the school. So we started off talking about just like, how do you take care of yourself? What do you do in the morning? How do you handle your stress? And pretty soon we were talking about things like pay for paraprofessionals and the break time that paraprofessionals versus teachers got. We were talking about the difference between how staff voice was heard and how leadership voice was heard. And by the end of our year together, we were able to have a really complicated conversation around power and equity, where leadership was able to admit that they felt vulnerable sometimes, and they didn't always know if they were making the right decision. And at the end of that, I was like, wow, what was that? And so for the past 8 years, I've been trying to figure that out and trying to recreate that wellness. And I've been really lucky to get to partner with EmpowerEd along the way. And we've been very lucky to get to work with OSSI along the way to do the Educator Wellness Furnace. So today is an opportunity for us to be able to share the learning that we've done over the past 8 years, but also over the past specifically 2 years of doing the grant work. I want to say thank you so much to our school partners who are going to be presenting with us, because without you all, these are just the ideas. If you all be taking the risk and putting them into practice is really amazing. I want to go over a little bit more about what the symposium is today. So we could have taken this time just to lecture, and this does work for us. But we know that that would only be half of the equation, because what we've really found to be effective in this work is conversations, relationship building, and everybody bringing a little piece that they know or believe in and bringing it together to make that bigger. And in our school wellness work, I think we've met 3 kinds of people. First kind of person is someone who says the way we've done it in the past is the way we'll do it in the future, and we just have to work harder at that, even when it's not working. And the second kind of person is the person who says it's too big and too complicated to ever be fixed, so we're not going to try anymore. And then the third kind of person, who I'm assuming are the people here today, are the people who believe that there are big changes that need to be made, and also believe that if we show up, we can make those changes. And I don't think it's always easy to be a person like that. And so that's why it's very special that so many of us have gathered today, and why we really want to make sure that you all have a chance to get to know each other. And as I said, cross-pollinate, take a little bit that you understand or know, or that question that you're really holding, and then bring it into the group, because we think that that's really how these seeds start to grow and more. So for our symposium today, a little rundown of how we're going to do things. We're having 3 mini workshops from each of our school partners, and we're going to highlight a different aspect of educator wellness. And I'm going to pass it over to Scott in a second to share that framework that we're using. From there, we're going to meet in dedicated breakout groups, meaning if you're sitting with somebody and a group of people, that you're going to be able to meet with them 4 different times throughout the symposium to talk about ideas. And then at the end, we're going to release our educator wellness reports and share some more about the methods that have worked for us, and be able to share more about how we can stay in touch with one another. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again for being here and pass it over to Scott.
Thanks, Gracie. Again, thank you all for being here. This is really wonderful to have all of you here, all the people online, to talk about this wellness work, which has just been so impactful. EmpowerEd has been around for approaching 6 years. And when we started, our work was very much centered on teacher retention. That's why I started EmpowerEd to begin with, just experiencing at my school all the students who had kind of internalized that a lot of their teachers were just not going to be there the next year, and it was their expectation. And that was really heartbreaking to me, the way that they internalized that it was about them. And what we knew was that there were people, my colleagues and I, that there were people who were leaving our school, leaving a lot of other schools, and almost all of that had to do with adult factors. And my theory was that if we could fix the adult factors, so that the adults could stay for the kids. And so that's really why EmpowerEd started, and we've centered teacher retention and teacher voice as a means of teacher retention, and the importance of teacher voice in itself. And we started to do school partnerships actually very early, but on a pretty small scale, with 1 or 2 schools a year in our first initial years. And we learned a lot through that process. And one of those things we learned was actually that while EmpowerEd was doing a lot of workshops and school training on elevating teacher voice, Gracie was doing a lot of work on self-care and individual wellness and coaching with individuals. And we realized, having known each other already, that EmpowerEd was doing this work that was really centered on voice, and we kept kind of running into just the lack of the personal wellness, the lack of the attention to the individual needs. And so we were focused very big picture and realized that was a real gap in what we were doing. And the work that Gracie was doing with some of the schools early on realized that there was a missing piece in that, which is if you just focused on people's individual needs, that they were like, what about the system that's dragging us down, right? So we realized you really have to do both of those things at the same time. And so we were just really, really fortunate to discover that this OSCE Educator Wellness Technical Assistance Grant, which we've been part of for the last couple of years, was acknowledging right off the bat, and we'll see this in a second, that we had to tackle all 3 levels, the individual, interpersonal, and systemic. And so you can see the results that we've gotten. We have over 16 different partner schools across the district, including 5 that we've partnered deeply with through this grant for the last couple of years. 90% of educators believing they've learned new ideas and perspectives that will positively influence their personal wellness, and 95% believing this approach, this 3-tiered approach, is the right one to help turn around positive school culture, adult culture in their school. You can go to the next one. So this will just show you what this our mission is, right? And specifically related to wellness, which is that whole school model, right? Which is really related to these tiers. So we'll go to that next slide and just look at what this model is. And this is courtesy of OSCE. And this 3-tiered approach, we've just found that it is just incredibly successful, and it gives trust, it builds trust right off the bat, because when we present this at school, people say, oh, the individual part is important, but it's the smallest part of that pyramid. And actually this interpersonal part, where we're talking about workplace relationships, is a bigger part of that pyramid. And actually the biggest part of this pyramid is the bottom, that focuses on organizational or systemic change. And so the teachers who come in often with a lot of cynicism kind of immediately have this feeling, oh, you're going to actually tackle all of this. And that kind of, plays a really important role. I'll read a couple of comments later from teachers, in response to the initial workshop that we do, of just saying, we've had a lot of workshops before, but we've never had someone come in and say, we're allowed to tackle that part. And we do that together. So that's, just been really impactful. And so we're going to go to breakout groups. I'm going to turn it over to Gabrielle, and we'll just start with a little bit of getting to know each other.
is sharing like the foundation of this work. And so, hi, everybody, I'm Gabrielle DeBose. I'm the teacher leadership facilitator with EmpowerEd. I also teach at Youth Balance. And so Gracie said something really important yesterday. She said that this work is really theoretical. It will remain in theory until it begins to manifest or actualize in the schoolhouse. So my career is a long one, and this is the first time ever in almost 3 decades that the word wellness has been connected to teachers and principals and educators, etc. I know how vitally important this work is. Because when you know that you're called to this work as a teacher, as a principal, as a staff member within the school, then you don't have an off switch. And so for me, my switch has been on for 25 years. So this is the first time that I am being welcomed into receiving wellness for myself. And I know that my wellness has been impacted and it's suffered over the years because I just literally don't have an off switch. Like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's always about the students and the teaching, etc. So that's why this work is vitally important to me, so that teachers can find that work balance within their lives. Yes. So now you have a chance in your breakouts to introduce yourself, tell who you are, and why you're uplifting educator wellness, and why educated wellness matters to you. You ready to have those personal conversations? Let's go.
Yes. If you're online, you will now be going into breakout rooms to have the same conversation, and we'll put the prompts in the chat.
I guess I'll move the that little.
Actually,
Come back.
Forgive me.
Together. Right? Yeah. Felt very honored when we saw the list of people who had signed up today. Very excited for you all to learn from each other. A couple of things that I did not mention at first is you might wonder why there are Post-it notes on your seats. And these are because we know those are going to be important ideas that want to be shared throughout these conversations. So we ask you to just make a note of what those are, and then we'll use the doorway over there as a parking lot to just put the Post-it notes up to share comments. And then also, if you're online, you can just share them in the chat as well. So with that, we're going to launch into our first mini workshop, and I'm very excited to introduce you all to Danielle Nelson, who is the Chief of Wellbeing at Monument Academy. And I just, I'm such a believer in personal wellness, and I had this belief, like, can you make this work in a school setting? And then when I met Danielle, I was like, absolutely, you can, because we're doing it. So I'm excited for you all to learn from her. So come on up, Danielle.
It's a pleasure to be here. To those who are in person, to those who are online, I am Danielle Nelson, serving as the Chief of Wellbeing at Monument Academy Public Charter School. It is a boarding school for middle schoolers. How fun! And then we'll campus Monday to Friday, so you can see where my energy from. I wanted to intro, just giving a little story about how I got here, so passionate about the work. When I first came to Monument Academy, I was actually a contracted therapist through our CDO program through DBA. So I was working with a community-based organization. And space in the school can be really, really hard to find for those contractors. So my office was probably the size of that closet there. Not going to take this as a way that you don't value my work, but I was seeing that big work was being done in such a small space, right? So I was there ready to serve the students, ready to serve the parents, but I started seeing more staff come into my office than the kids. So I said, this may be something here we need to bring up. So I put it in front of our CEO, I put it in front of our leadership at the time, and I will say, a few years later, we have a suite as big as this room. We have offices for each counselor. We have up to 5 counselors on site. We have partners who come in, and staff members are still coming into the suite as size of this room. So can we just clap it up for space? I would say physical space means a lot when you're doing this wellness work, at least because you have the capacity to serve in a comfortable setting. So I just wanted to give honor to our leadership making that happen. So I will say the biggest problem I was starting to see among the staff members were fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma. So we serve a lot of students who are already impacted by trauma. So they start with us in 5th grade. Before 5th grade, we have so many students who have already been to at least 5 schools. That's a lot. We have so many students whose ACE score is even beyond 7. We're talking 7 to 10. That's a lot. But we are there with them. We are living with them. We call ourselves a 24/7 respite center, not with the school. So we're encountering things with our students that they usually would encounter with their own parents at home. So now we have to take on the role as pseudo parents. So you can just imagine the issues that we're experiencing. Another thing we're seeing, even when we go home on a holiday break or just a weekend, our kids come back with narratives that are so shocking. You can't believe that happened on a Friday afternoon, Saturday, and a Sunday morning, but they work with us Sunday evening. So they're coming back to us with these horrible stories, and it's hurting us as adults. We question ourselves, should we be a 24/7 residential? Should we extend our school year to all year round school? Should we? We're always answering those questions, but we can't control that all the time. So I just wanted to highlight these problems is real in the work that we're doing. Yes, we're responsible for academic achievement. Yes, we're responsible for keeping them safe. Yes, we're responsible for developing them socially and emotionally, but hey, we have to take care of ourselves. So with that being said, I was able to shout out to Ossie and the school strengthening tool and the work plan. I was able to put this concrete goal on our plan, and we were able to partner with EmpowerEd's. They introduced this framework to us, and it has boosted our services for staff wellness. I have made it a part of our multi-tiered system of support for students, and I made sure we include staff wellness initiatives throughout the entire school year. So on a monthly basis, we're doing activities not just for our students, but for our staff and parents, of course, but staff in particular is the highlight of my work now. Being a clinical social worker in the field now going on 17 years, this was important to me because I didn't want to experience burnout. I'm so passionate about the work. I wanted to remain just as happy and passionate as I am now. So I make sure my wellness is intact, and I make sure our staff now have the self-care plans in front of them. So some working solutions that I will always highlight. This is important. Having a dedicated wellness coordinator at your school. Having someone who's going to hold the school accountable to look at those wellness goals, put some initiatives out there, have some activities planned, and be able to monitor the progress. Definitely with EmpowerEd coming in, we team up, we have PD sessions, we're in front of the staff, but you have to own it for yourself. Take your own plan home and work on it. So when you come back to work, you're coming well. All right, routine time wellness check-ins. That looks like staff coming into that sleep like I talked about. Really being intentional to ask your staff, how are you doing? I know the fight that's happening in your classroom. Can we talk about that at the end of the day? I don't want you taking that energy home. I know the student was crying. I know we just had a death in the community. I know we just went to that funeral for one of our kids. How are you doing? Being intentional with checking in with our team wellness. Creating a well-being advisory committee. This may look like a wellness team. I get so many staff members saying, "Ms. Nelson, I want to work on your team." I say, what's the difference? We have licensed counselors for the well-being team, and then we have an interdisciplinary team for the wellness work that is going to be in the school. And that's like those cheerleaders of the school. We're championing positive social climate. We're promoting positivity. You can be on that team, right? That feeds into the work that we're doing. You may can't be on the staff part, but you definitely can commit. And that's where I see a lot of commitment there from our staff members. We're growing in numbers. We have our monthly check-ins with Gracie and Scott, and we're seeing the intentional work being done throughout the school. So they can take their work to their collaborative planning sessions. They can take their work to their own committees and continue the work that we're all trying to do for our whole school. Offering a toolbox of coping and calming strategies. This is really fun to me because I think we can promote strategies in any type of way, not just speaking in front of the staff for professional development sessions, but we created a newsletter where we actually put strategies and mental health literacy in these newsletters every month. My team is responsible for educating the teachers, the dedicated aides, the care professionals, the house parents with real-time experiences and strategies. So we may highlight anxiety, ODD, ADHD, test prep, like really getting into the nitty-gritty. We had a whole series around grief and loss because this is the third school year. Of course, we lost a student to gun violence, and it impacted our community in such a way. Our babies are young. This is middle school. We're not even high school. And our students are coming to us afraid to even come learn. So we have to really heal that first. So we were putting some grief and loss strategies in that newsletter and mindful moments, videos. The teachers always say, I don't have time to do anything else. So we put links to videos and just say, take 5 minutes, have a mindful moment in your classroom, have a calming session. When you feel like your classroom is off task, reset your class by using these strategies regularly. And lastly, of course, organizing robust partnerships. So not only the work that we're doing with EmpowerEd is so critical, but continuing the partnerships with those community-based organizations who can help us in the work. So when we go on break, when I need respite, I can say, stagger it, please take this critical caseload and work with them in the community, follow them by pathways of community support groups, CBI, intensive therapy, all the things that we know exist in our schools that we just are limited to work on at this. So next. And now we're going to open up with our discussion prompt. So we always get focused questions, and we always get a little attitude from some members in the community. We're not going to really focus on that part because I say it's always something that we can do. Even if you can't overhaul the school, you can't change leadership, it's something that you can take responsibility of, and that is your individual value. So the first question, what do you see as the main barriers for teachers having the wellness support they need? And second question, how can you assert your leadership to meaningfully address the need? This is out in the room. We start the discussion.
Thank you. We'll have 10 minutes for this discussion. Thank you so much.
Second.
Now,
It's very interesting, actually. The video. That's why. And also, And not just a one side of the goal, but we get it around the title, right? Sometimes. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And now we're gonna move to tier 2, which is the interpersonal parts of that tier. Building school culture. How does it happen? What is the factors to make that happen under the auspices of wellness? And so uplifting staff culture, community building, bridging divides, and ongoing school wellness, et cetera. I'm going to turn it over now to Martin Townsend, who is the assistant principal at Stella Public Schools. We're doing this together.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Grayson, for inviting me. Again, I'm Marcus Townsend. I am the Director of Culture and Student Support at Sullivan Public Charter School. We are a dual language pre-K through 5 school in New York 4. Our language is Hebrew. And with that brings teachers directly to the video. So we have this cultural need to educate each other. And that's been one of the sources that we've found that causes teacher stress in our building. So we moved to a co-teaching model and immediately saw the need to allow space for our Israeli teachers and our American teachers to do that relationship building so essential. And a little story, when I first got there, one of the things that I thought was okay was the Black History Month to highlight Israelis of African descent. And what I learned from some of the Ethiopian teachers was it was not. Things around kosher food, whether or not Israelis should have separate food and bring food in and that sort of thing. All those things played a role into me looking at our school culture and saying something else. Working with EmpowerEd has been great. It's given us opportunities to get teachers that space to have conversations. So you see a video here of teachers actually engaged in that work. It happens a couple times a month between the committees that they form. We're carrying it over into next year by continuing this work with committees. Some of the ideas about bridging culture have been brought to me already. Having staff outings. Certainly developing the budget so that we can do things outside of that building to build those relationships and interact with one another. Talking about taking field trips to different museums in the city that are related to different cultures that we have in our building. And again, this is important because part of our mission was stated is we develop goals. If we want to model for our students how we interact with people in our culture, it's important that we actually learn about one another and then build the school community within itself, but it's projected in our students or teachers' families.
Okay, so next slide, talking about, school culture and also the level that stress has on teachers, principals, every adult in the building. According to brand research, and you can read through that for yourself, but it is important that everybody in the building, every adult in the building have access to wellness. And that word access really means permission to approach. So school leadership has to commit to bringing wellness into the schoolhouse so that teachers understand, everybody, every adult in the building understands, have permission to access that wellness. According to the report, this is especially important for Latinx, mid-career, and female teachers and principals. And you drop down to the second point, you see from the percentages how frequent job stress impacts teachers. It's a greater amount of stress in comparison to adults working in other fields. As I mentioned earlier in my introduction, Teachers are always on with a myriad of responsibilities every single day. And oftentimes we will neglect our own wellness, right? But it's time for change. And it is about teacher revolution. That's what this shirt is about. Okay, next slide, please.
And so we just look at some of the causes of teacher stress. Or that we are but you know, it's important to again provide some relief for these people. You know, as a school leader, it's really about getting them.
Next slide. So then here's some of the solutions that we have found effectively to work in terms of wellness in the school that EmpowerEd's work this year. So look at that number one, school leadership commitment to wellness work. Without the number one happening, the rest of the solution points really don't matter because they won't manifest in the schoolhouse. We gotta have school-wide participation. And so, teachers and staff workers can see that the administration is in on this wellness work 100%, then they can believe that they can be transparent, which is what point 3 is talking about, school approved incentives that encourages staff transparency to be real with the work so that we can really get at the issues that work against wellness. Let's drop down to number 4. The team that is going to be doing wellness in the building, including the coordinator, etc., they have to have time. So time has to be built into, so schedules have to shift so the wellness teams have time to work actually across the school with everyone involved. It can't just be a cute little word that we're putting out there. It really requires time and time management. And then point 5, the administration to include the wellness practices into school policy. Right, this wellness work is not meant to be a one-off thing. We're just going to do it this year and forget about it as the years progress. No, it has to work itself into the policies and practices, the systems, if you will, of the school itself. Shifts, mind shifts.
And as solid for us, the work that we've done, which we're evident in some of these things that Educator wellness provides, right? So by creating this format, with EmpowerEd's help, that we develop groups for people to talk different things about. It has really given just a more positive feeling of school climate. You see those interactions happening between the teachers of different cultures that work together, more in a friendly way and necessarily a professional way, right? We even develop friendship and talking to each other as friends and talking about the students just more honestly and openly. Professional learning aspect of it, again, we want to educate our teachers about the culture within our building. It applies to our students as well. And this is given just the ideas that are coming from these teachers around how we can manage this and how we can provide these opportunities. Not coming from the top down, we really had teachers buying into this and what they want to see done. Some of the stuff it's into diversity, equity, and inclusion work next year. And so in terms of how it's aligned with our school goals, it has been a positive experience.
So now we're at discussion prompt 2. What wellness policies create better relationships in a school environment? Wellness policies. And how do you gain leadership buy-in to make these policies happen? Right. That's it. That's work. In buildings. Maybe not.
All right, we are getting back together. Everyone back in breakout? All right, thank you all for that great conversation. I'm going to turn it over now for this next section in tier 3, which is again looking at the organizational, looking at the systemic example to one of our absolutely outstanding partner schools, Ida B. Wells, and Allison Rice, who's been leading our work there.
So I'm just going to be talking about amplifying, teacher voice, and I just want to give a little bit of some background on myself. So I've been in education for over 20 years. I've been in a lot of different schools. I taught in Baltimore City for most of my career, and then I came to DC a couple of years ago. So I've been here, my 6th year in DC, and teacher wellness is really very much important to me because I've been in so many different spaces and I've had so many different experiences with, other staff and administration. I do feel like it's super, super important. Also, I think, just a couple of years ago when, the pandemic hit, I feel like we're in such a different space on with them. But, so just kind of go back, we can go back to the other slide, I'm sorry. So the problem is that we're going to be talking about is that teachers do not feel heard or respected as professionals. There's a widespread criticism about initiatives or that anything significant will change to make their jobs more manageable. So again, thinking about all these different experiences, teachers want to be recognized as the experts that they are. So thinking about Wells and where we started with EmpowerEd in 2021 school year. So this is right after the pandemic hit. But Wells was founded, we're a very young school. We were founded in 2019. I've been working there since the 2021 school year. But everything completely just started. We only had 6th grade because we were middle school, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything went virtual. So then the next year, everything was virtual, things were uncertain, and there was this huge gap between, okay, this is where we all knew how to teach, and this is where things are like this way, and then all of a sudden, like we have to figure out what's going to be sustainable for our future. So if we want to build something at Wells, we're again a young school. So upon our return, our administration knew that they had to grow and develop and make sure that as things were happening, we needed to be super reflective, and they are. I feel very blessed to have a school that has administrators who are so supportive and reflective. And they want to ask what's working and what needs to be changed, and they do ask the staff. We survey our staff a lot, sometimes over survey, but we do survey our staff a lot, and we want to make sure that the teachers are going to be healthy, that they're going to feel good in their space, in their job, in our so we did a survey and found 3 trends. So teachers wanted more of the showcase talent or take on leadership roles. So we found a way to address that. Teachers need more informal strength focused feedback. So again, if we have an administrator or a coach or even a peer walking into our classroom, tell me something good first before you pull out something that we need to work on. Tell us what we're doing well so that we can, it's kind of like that. Let's keep going. Let's this, this learning keep going. And then finally, strength focused feedback and teacher emotional mental wellness. Those are the things that need to be prioritized. So as we were moving forward with EmpowerEd, these are the things that we started to talk about.
Yeah. So I'll let you touch on these a little more, but these are some of the initiatives that we put in place there. on staff-led PD, and Allison can talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but the positive instructional walk, something she referenced to make sure that not every time that administrators are going around the building, it's for the purpose of evaluation, but there's also for just positive only instructional walk. And then green slip, which is actually, we're having a conversation back there about the wellness days, right? And the ability to give people that permission. And that's actually something they've been able to successfully do at Wells by advocating. I think one thing that's important to point out is, especially in a system like BCPS, it's a big LEA where you have a central office, and this is obviously true of big charter LEAs too. Sometimes there's an actual barrier with a central office, right, in the bureaucracy or in decisions from higher up. And sometimes there's just a perceived barrier. And often schools are like, central office is never going to let us do this, so we're not going to even ask, right? And we found out in the case of Wells that, like, actually, it was something that I must have heard a million times from teachers at different schools. The central office would never allow that. As soon as the principal and the teachers asked together, they did. So we have to think about the difference between the actual barriers and the perceived barriers, and what it can mean for teachers and the school leader to have consensus about what they want and ask for it together.
So one of the things that came out of talking to teachers and surveys at the end of last year was teachers want more opportunity to showcase their talents, showcase what they know, what they do, that not everybody gets to see. So our amazing ELA instructional coach, Claire Shanahan, I think she created Thank You Thursdays. So every other Thursday, we have teachers who open up their classroom, their space, and they teach the staff, anybody who wants to come. It's not mandatory, it's optional. There's CSE credit that's offered for it. So if you go to this many, I think it's 3 over the course of the CSE window, that, checks off one of the boxes, but people are able to go in, see a wellness practice, or see, I know the digital arts teacher this morning was doing how to use the programs that she's using in digital arts. She's teaching the kids to be able to bring that into everybody's classroom. We had one using high school points and how to use them effectively. So lots of different ideas that people have that maybe they haven't been asked directly, but they're like, hey, wait a second, I know how to do this. I want other people to know what to do, and I want to share this with people. So that gives the space and time to do that. Positive instructional walks. So we started these in the beginning of the year. Again, we're going to actually start another a session, I believe in May, where not only administrators, but also coaches and also peers, which we're going to be going into people's classrooms, not even in our own content, but I teach social studies, I am in the social studies department, but going into, say, with the ELA classroom or math classrooms to see what's going on and leave positive notes. We're going to get some new like post-it notes and stuff. So again, to be able to leave so people know what they're doing well. And then the green slips. So that was one thing that we came up with, and people feel really good about the fact that they get a day. Everybody in the beginning of the year got an actual, and it's like a physical green slip that says you have one day that you can take free of charge. Like, you don't have to use your sick time, you don't have to use any other time, and you just have to hand that in. It does have to be kind of like pre-planned, but I know there have been some people that are just like, listen, tomorrow, sorry, but like I need this. And again, it creates, I shouldn't say it creates, but it really has like taken administration and teachers and put them closer together as far as like support, and knowing that our administration, and I say our administration because we have a Principal Wiles, we have 3 assistant principals, and everybody's on that same page, and that same page is making sure that their teachers feel like they are important, they are cared about, and they're supported. And this was just one way that they were able to, say thank you, and we do,
So not everything we try in schools works. So we want to talk about something that hasn't worked. And a lesson learned from something we've actually tried to do in several schools and it's been difficult to get off the ground. So this idea is called pineapple chart. I think it's a brilliant thing. I think all schools should do it, but there's some cautions about how we make things like this work. A pineapple chart, as you can see a beautiful example here, is like, just put up here what you're doing. Any teacher can go up to the bulletin board and say, at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, I'm using this new technology in my classroom. Come on in, right? Open invitation for any other teacher to come on in. There's a lot of things that are like volunteer only in education that don't happen. It is actually part of why we feel so strongly that these grants and the opportunity for partners to be there and intentionally doing it is so important, because resources can be available, right? Actually, people using them is a different thing. So we put this pineapple chart up. We did it in Wells. We worked on it in other schools. And then there's the next step, which is people got to sign up, right? And so we've, in several schools, and this happened in Wells, we had a round, right, where the team is very intentional about going around to teachers and saying, would you sign up for this? We have this new initiative. And I think at the one in Wells in the office, there's cards next to it or something. You can, all the materials are there.
It's been repurposed for.
Yeah. So like all the materials are there. People can go up and just do it. But again, people have a lot on their list, right, as teachers. And so things that rely on them adding one thing to their plate and doing a new thing are really tough to implement. And so just thinking about things that rely on getting volunteers, how do you keep momentum? Because you can do a round of something like this and people can think it's great. But the difference between this and Thinking Thursdays was like, this happens every Thursday. Someone signs up, there's a coordinator at the school who makes sure someone signs up, and it's been incredibly successful with the people who come. This is an idea that can work, but you have to systematize, right, how it's going to happen and not just kind of leave things up for volunteers. I'll talk about one more thing here, go to the next slide, which is empowerment languages. So this is a thing we came up with, I think a couple of years ago doing this school-based work, which is that a lot of school leaders, when we talk about teacher voice, like this is like a hard thing to unlock, because a lot of school leaders very much want to listen to their teachers. And they don't understand, right, why teachers see it differently. They're like, we have an open door policy, we survey every month, we do all these things. Why do teachers feel like they're not being listened to or they're not being heard? We do all these things to listen to and hear from them. And part of the answer, I think, is this, which is people feel heard in very different ways. Every individual feels heard differently, right? So some people, if they confront a personal challenge or problem and they conquer it, they feel heard. For some people, it's learning a new personal skill. That makes them feel empowered, right? When they advocate for systemic change, they want to step outside the classroom and present something like this. That makes them feel empowered, right? For some people, it's taking on a formal leadership role that gives them a title. For others, it's being relied on by others or trusted by others to do something. For others, it's just, can they be in a space and be vulnerable with others? That makes them feel empowered. So acknowledging first that everybody feels empowered differently is really hard, because that means that even if you have good systems in place for voice, there will always be a group of people who say, I don't feel heard still. And how do you deal with that challenge, right? So part of that is working with school leaders and figuring out how do you have enough systems that have different accessibility paths for different types of people, that they feel heard, but then they also feel a loop back on that feeling heard. That makes sense. And before we go into the what comes next, I just want to point out one of the keys to our success in doing this work is that we also do advocacy work at the same time. And for several years, we got a lot of these posters here on our like fund educator wellness, right? We do advocacy work at the same time as we actually partnering with schools. And for many years starting this work, I got a lot back from a whole lot of people about you have to choose. You got to be an advocacy organization or you can work with schools. You can't do both of these things at the same time. And it was true for a little while. But when we go into schools now, the reason we are successful, I would say Gracie not even had like one of the reasons we have trust in the teachers is because we're also an advocacy organization. Because they know our names, they trust us because they see us doing that work. And they're like, we know you're pushing the systemic stuff, so we trust you to take on the individual stuff too. If they don't believe that you're willing to fight for them outside of the school, it's really hard to get their trust that you're going to fight for them inside the school, if that makes sense. So doing those things at the same time is going to take it to us being trusted in that way. So we'll go back to Wells and what comes next.
So some of the things that we're working on between now and the end of this year to, in preparation for next year is we actually just took one of our staff surveys in in a meeting just like this, yesterday afternoon, but we are also going to continue those positive instructional learning walks. And we're going to include peer observations as well. So we're going to move into, making sure that people are seeing, teachers are seeing other teachers. Also just continuing to make sure that everybody on the teaching team knows what's going on and being very transparent. And that's another thing, at my school, the transparency from the administrative level is very, things are very clear. We know what's going on and pretty much why, because people have made themselves vulnerable. Also, this is one thing that I actually started, with working with my social studies team. Like, one day I just took my meeting day and I was like, you know what, instead, what we're gonna do today, so I'm gonna put this piece of paper up on the wall and I just wanna know what you need. Like, that's all, we're just gonna push the social studies side for today. I wanna know what you need. And so it was great because in even my small social studies group, they said, wait a second, can we, because I didn't have any titles or anything, it wasn't organized in any way. And they're like, well, can we put a sign up for quick fixes? Like, this is stuff that we just need that. And so like one of the things was staples. At the end of the day, guess what? Staples were in the copier, which was amazing because it was like, okay, that's saving, 15 teachers 20 minutes stapling 180 copies of a packet that they needed on this next week. And then long-term solutions. So like, this is not something that we can fix right now today, but like, this is the information that I can bring back to the administrative team and be like, okay, this is what needs to happen. What can we do to try to make this happen? And then finally, just like coming from that, and it was when, it was our last EmpowerEd meeting, which the administrators came and sat in on. And we decided that we are going to have conversations around staff norms and expectations, but those larger conversations are going to come after we have those smaller conversations. And so we're going to have that space within our team meetings, not department, but team meetings. So like grade level team meetings, to figure out what people need. So, and it's going to be in a way that people can talk a little bit more freely because administrators are not invited to go. So that information can then be taken to administration and then we can plan, continue to plan for the next year.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go into our final discussion prompt. We have a few minutes fewer for this one. But the question is, how can we effectively counter staff cynicism if nothing systemically will change? Talking about the organizational level. And what role can you play in empowering teachers and staff members to successfully advocate and achieve that organizational change from whatever position you sit in this education world? We'll go into breakouts now.
Yeah.
And Ray, I hear how awesome these conversations are. Bye for anyone else. Yeah. I've been conversations that is really impactful. And if anyone else felt like that they just like had their mind opened in really great way today?
Yeah.
Okay, the mission accomplished. That is exactly what we wanted. Does anyone else feel a little less alone? And the difficult but important work that we're doing right now to change the system, that is a huge part of why we wanted to gather people today, is that we need to know that there are other people in it. And hopefully these are some relationships you can exchange in email. You can check in with each other a little bit, because being able to talk to people who, again, are going to show up wholeheartedly in a really complicated question right now is the way that we can stay in this and actually make some of the changes that we really know need to be made right now. We want to say that this is just the beginning of the conversation. We have not solved anything today, even though I hope we've really inspired you. And we really want to stay connected. And there are a few ways that we can do that. One is that EmpowerEd has a podcast. It's called the Educator Wellness Revolution podcast. There are people in this room who have been guests on this podcast already. And we feel like some of the best ways to change minds and change hearts is through conversation, just like we've done today. And so this is what you're going to get when you listen to the podcast, are some great conversations on some topics like flexible scheduling, how to address school trauma, the role of the wellness coordinator. So we already have 9 episodes we've done. We'll do a couple more this season. So you can scan that for Spotify or also search on Apple Podcasts. And if you want to be a guest or have ideas for us, please just be in touch and let us know. And with that, we have a short survey that we're hoping everyone can fill out. It's going to take you 5 minutes. Maybe not even, maybe 2 or 3. And this is just really like how you want to stay in touch. And we have some ideas on there. You could be a guest on our podcast. We could present together sometime. We could just be friends and have a coffee sometime. But we want to stay in touch. So if you just let us know how to do that, we will follow up with you afterwards. And then there's also a place to add in an idea of how we could stay in touch. And we would love that as well. So as you do that, we're also going to do something really exciting, which is present our Educator Wellness Reports. And this is, like we said, we have a lot of ideas that we talked about today, and we wanted you all to have something really tangible that you can take with you. If you are on the Zoom right now, that Yvette is dropping in a link that has a digital copy of this report, and also links to the podcast and the partnership survey. So it has more about what the 3-tiered approach is. If you like come home and you're like, what were the 3 tiers again? They're here. It also has some good statistics around why we're doing this work. And then we're really excited to share a work that's a bit of a work in progress. It's a collaboration. We have a wonderful educator wellness community of practice. Shout out to everyone who is in that community of practice who is here. And we've been brainstorming around like, how can we help schools better understand where they are and their wellness work? And so we have 4 stages that we've been able to start tracking around people who are, really kind of stepped away from the wellness, people who are sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out of wellness, what it looks like to really have that momentum in stage 3. And then we wanted to put a stage 4 in there. That's something that we haven't even seen before, but really what we feel like would be the solution. And so we've already had a lot of fun being able to use this to look at a school and be like, these things they're there, but they could go there. Or we've seen the school actually grow from here to there. So this is a fun one. We would love to hear your feedback on it. Again, it's a work in progress, and it's definitely a community project that we're still working on. As well, we have our 5 key strategies that we use in EmpowerEd, and this goes all the way from that, personal wellness support to how do we start to change things like flexible scheduling. And I want you all to pay special attention that we have a caution with each one of them, because part of this is that we've tried things and not everything works, as Scott says, or things need to be refined. So we're putting in what we have learned in those cautions around, like, this is what we would really advise if you wanted to move into this here. And then we have a case study with a really wonderful school that we worked with around some of their cultural work. Here too, some of the techniques that we have used and some of the outcomes that come from that as well. So this is something that we will keep adding to as we go along, but we wanted you to be able to take it with you to think about this conversation. Get going today. So with that, I want to thank, again, can we have a round of applause for all of our presentations? And I also very much want to recognize the partner schools that we would love to have had here, but because they are doing the work right now, they were not able to get away right now, and they're with the students, and so just to recognize them as well. Please keep in touch with us, don't hesitate to reach out, and again, you know, coming back to relationships again, like I don't think this is gonna be like a checklist of how we do this. It's gonna be about these kinds of conversations moving forward. So just thank you for showing up. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for listening to our stories. And we really look forward to the next symposium. Thank you all.
No, thank you.
Great. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.